I know these times won't last, even though they've been tough. Just let them know my people been had enough. Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. I know these times won't last, even though they've been tough. Just let them know my people been had enough. Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. I tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. Please, Lord, forgive me. They try to hold back and chill it like they ain't know it was written. Break every chain. Wanna free my people from mental prisons. Your eyes on the barrel, I know we'll narrow divisions. Hope is the boat that keep us afloat just as you envision. Fate to erase the pain from all of our people's blame. That's the good change. Actions to back up your spoken name. When they throw dirt on ours, we use it to plan game. When it rains, we go greater together, no matter the weather. Trust these dark days, gonna get better. Know that love will be the light to guide all our endeavors. And even if the tide should rise, we'll ride it forever. Why? We are mighty, we'll fight for our lives, cause we're dying to live. Future is ours, the timing now. I can be proud, saying it loud, we gave it a roar. There's so much more to give, we breaking down all the walls. I know these times won't last, even though they've been tough. Just let them know my people been had enough. Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. I know these times won't last, even though they've been tough. Just let them know my people been had enough. Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise I tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. Never backing down for the cause. Try to put our life on pause, cause we move in the image of God. No matter the hate that's spoken, our spirits remain unbroken. The divine map says you can't count us out. We are the answer. From the youth to the elders, ain't much you can tell us. Style and brilliance of mind, heart is bright as sunshine. Warrior spirits alive, so no, we won't be denied. So vibration is high and the frequency so angelic like. Rise up, people come on. Rise up, rise up, rise up. I know these times won't last, even though they've been tough. Just let them know my people been had enough. Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. I know these times won't last, even though they've been tough. Just let them know my people been had enough. Tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise I tell them we gon' rise up. We gon' rise up. Rise up. Rise up, oh, rise up.
Sir, rise up, family, peace and blessings. It is Monday night. So you know what time it is. Holy cow. All right, on. Soundbytes International Radio. African consciousness is the claim.
The world is the aim.
Absolutely. Bringing the conversations pertinent to our diasporic landscape to you, and you all over the globe.
And you give thanks.
Right, absolutely. To ensure the healing and fortification of our family the world over. Hasir Khan Neferah, and this is, of course,
Neferah to my T-Ra family.
Indeed. So make sure you tune in, join the conversation, share the broadcast, family. As always, we're live on Facebook and on YouTube. So tune in with us, family. When you come on briefly, start, it was a good delayed start. But we wanted to check in with this episode to it is Indigenous Peoples Day, so we're uplifting and celebrating the contribution and impact and history of the indigenous people of this land, particularly this U.S. land, and also looking at the impact of the indigenous across the globe, especially particularly for us as growers and farmers and activists and things of that nature. The impact on food sovereignty, what that means for our planet, what that means to heal our planet, heal our people. Our food ways, traditional ways that we interact with our food and our food systems that are impacted by the contributions of the indigenous peoples of this land. So we do honor and uplift the indigenous people, our indigenous ancestors, in the here and now and of our history. So we give thanks to them, and we honor and uplift them on this very day, where we acknowledge them versus the other guy, right? And
remain nameless.
right, and uprooting of educations that we received over time, that have been full of lies and deceit. Meanwhile, in the hiding of the people and creating invisibility of the people, creating this kind of not kind of, but really just like this act of erasure of a people in their history. So we're thankful to see more and more over the past few years now. It was been 7 years since it's been really like a consistent, like staunch resistance to the day, to be a space of uplifting of the indigenous, Native American, indigenous. We do know some of our folks even still say Indian, but we do, we still want to stand with what it means to be an indigenous person to the land and native to the land. So we'll stand in that, right? But we take this time honoring what they've done, as we honor our ancestors, our African ancestors, the ones that were here, the ones that were brought here, meaning the ones that were here as well with the indigenous people, those Africans indigenous to this land as well. So we honor everyone. We honor everyone in that particular space, and we thank you for what you created in our lineage, despite the historical attempt at erasure of you. But we see you, and we you are here now, in the here and now with us ancestrally, and with, as we go to congregation with our people that are out now doing the work, right? Our people that are out in the streets, out on the ground doing the work, and especially out in the fields and out in the on the farms and out in the on the land, being land stewards. So we appreciate you, and we continue to learn from your wisdom. So we appreciate you in that. Remember you can follow us on the various channels. We're on YouTube, again, Soundbytes International Radio. Please subscribe on YouTube, Soundbytes International Radio. Make sure you follow and like us on Facebook at Soundbytes INTO Radio. Make sure you follow us on Instagram at Soundbytes International Radio. So those are past episodes, past seasons, on Soundbytes International Radio, on Apple Podcasts, and on Spotify. So make sure y'all listen to that. Make sure y'all go click the 5 stars, give us the ratings and the reviews on those things that help within the algorithm of the matrix that we're still operating in, based on tools we have. So but in the meantime, we do use these tools to get to you. So please, hit those subscribes, hit those follows, hit those likes. All those things do help to get us out far and wide. Make sure you tell your friends to subscribe as well to their YouTube. Once again, we're trying to get the subscribers up, because it helps, right? So if I don't know if you had anything you wanted to say, wanted to touch on in regards to this day, or just in general.
Well, we had a great and greetings, family. You gotta excuse me because I come on anyway when I have these allergies. I've been dealing with them my whole life for the most part, on and off, for whatever reason. We were at the farm today. We were doing Volunteer Day with indigenous farmers. Ramapo, shouts out y'all, Chief Man, give thanks. Ramapo Turtle Clan Tribe Chief.
Shouts out to Chief Man.
Shout out to Chief Man and the family out there, and the mother, Nicolina, for welcoming us into the family, as well as just being a space for the space, for the healing, for the growth, for the unity,
for village and community, absolutely.
Community aspect, and standing by that, and advocacy and protection, So we want to shout out to them, want to send love and positive action to them as well. And, just the whole indigenous conversation, you just really got to look at how far you're going back in history.
Right.
Our lives did not begin in 1492, 1619. Our lives as African people, our lives as
whatever they want to call it,
did not begin there. And it's really important for us to take the time to go back a little bit farther. I was looking for my book in here. I'm always looking for my books. I just take them with me. I put them in my bags. I travel with them. Sometimes they're on my bookshelf. Sometimes they in places in my apartment, somewhere out here. So we're looking for Ivan Van Sertimer that came before Christopher Columbus. And Baba Malim was shared my other one. Let me see, where is it? So we can at least take a look at, the Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, slavery and the rise of European capitalism. And that was by Baba John Henry Clark. So we want to take the opportunity to educate ourselves. We got to understand where the information that we get and why, the purpose of the information that we get and why we're getting it. There is a shaping of a consciousness. We talk about one humanity, we talk about one blood, we talk about one entire earth fabric and earth family, but we cannot ignore the social landscape that we are living, and that it seems that every group and every space and every group of people, every man for themselves is what it's looking like. So we can get to a kumbaya, we can get to everybody's hands in the middle conversation and everybody pooling in their resources, but we also got to address some of the dysfunctions that are on our social landscape. And there's a consciousness that we were listening to. There's a scientific theory called minimalism. Help me out here. Minimizing the concerns of others. And as an African, again, I said, how far back you going when you say indigenous people? How far are you going back on your time clock? Because indigenous people, millions of indigenous people were on this land long before Europeans got here. Life didn't begin in the earth when Europeans showed up and found things and put their names on a discovery, or they just investigated and researched and found these things and now belongs to European credit. And it didn't happen before they got there. So there's a sense of understanding the social landscape and the reason for the way we learn and why our minds are shaped, and our social landscape and our ability to contemplate is shaped the way that it is. For many people, it's a challenge to examine the information that we've received. Just thinking in their own minds. I'm not talking about speaking out. I'm not talking about public speaking. I'm not talking about debating. I'm not talking about being in spaces where they need to be scrutinized. I'm just meaning just in their own minds. People experience anxiety, debunking or investigating or diving deep in analysis and just the information that they have received. But there is a reason why we've received the narratives that we've received. I asked a long time ago on the show, about 3-4 years ago, I asked you, how is it that everyday nondescript John and Jane Q public police officers have this issue with African people to the point where they are interacting with African people, and just to see them is a trigger. Just to see them, haven't done anything, just to see them is a trigger. And not just police, everyday John and Jane Q public, now we got this thing called Karens. Like, what is happening? Right? So there's something to understand, that the way that information is disseminated, the way that it is taught, the scholars that you take in information to, and this is also affecting people having a white cultural experience. Whiteness is mechanized because there was no such thing as whiteness before, right? When Africans ruled Europe, right? Africans were in Europe, came to Europe, held high office, and after ran Europe, the Africans ran the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it depends on how far back you're willing to go. So when we look at this conversation, we get to examine who's shaping the narrative and why are we shaping this narrative the way that we are and what the purpose of it is. And the minimalization of African people and the indigenous of this land and their journey and struggle has to do with coddling white fragility and growing this experience of white people who are having a white cultural experience, entitlement to other people's things. That's it. Because you've been deemed, and then this whole, we listening to WBAI today, going through another analysis, or a deeper analysis, or a broad analysis, or adding to our analysis, various parts of the historical timeline, and going back to Christendom in Europe as being the catalyst that created the invasion of the indigenous of this land, as well as was the catalyst for setting in motion the enslavement of African people. Period. The church is largely responsible for that because church and state was one authority at one point. You're looking at monarchy, the monarchy and their support and financial investment in supporting, the invasion and, the exploitation of this colonialist exploitation of the indigenous of this land, their resources, their land, their labor, and the whole conversation of people who are having a white cultural experience to get where they were willing to go. They decided to genocide hundreds of millions of people that were already here on this soil. It's just a thing to say, right? It's a thing to acknowledge that you're literally standing on the remains of people. And there's something to contemplate around the dismissal and the minimalization of an act that was not life or death. It really wasn't life or death for Europeans to come to this land and do what they did to indigenous people here. And we got to start at the beginning, because we cannot move forward. We cannot continue to sweep these things under the rug. We cannot continue to pretend it away. We cannot continue to minimalize it. We cannot. It is costing too much. And we are really at a point right now, we're at the brink of a huge influx in, I can't even begin to tell you and expand what my understanding and consciousness is, and wisdom and insight and intuition is for what's possibly possible, but for what's next, based on where we are right now. It does not look good, I'm here to tell you. So I try not to go into that with people, particularly those who are not really already making this analysis. I can have this conversation with individuals who are already deeply in the analysis. So Africans, Indigenous, we did our ancestry, and we can find our ancestry with the largest ancestry box kit with the African ancestry going back 500 to 2,000 years with 44,000 DNA samples to use, going back as far as 2,000 years. That's 2,000. That's still not even long enough. But for right now, given the journey that we've had, and because of the way that certain individuals have placed information as to how the society and the social landscape is going to move, where certain people are given access and others are not, and certain folks are allowed to. So it's not really a meritocratic space. None of those things really, those are just the things that coddle white consciousness, so that white consciousness just continues to participate in the madness that even hurt themselves. But they continue to participate in it. So we get to look at humanizing the experience that African people, that indigenous people were on this land, and we can literally go back more than 2,000 years. And since I have part of my DNA code from my matrilineal line is the Kru people, so, and being that the Kru people in Africa were actually Liberian Kru people were known for their navigation abilities. It's safe to say quite possibly that my indigenous family members were already on this soil before Europeans got here. That would even be safe to say.
Yeah.
That would be safe to say that they navigated their ways from there, came here, and had already been here. That's a safe assumption. So, because 2,000 years is long, 500 years, you're talking about 1619, beginning of the transatlantic slave trade. After horrific Holocaust and genocide of the indigenous that were here on this soil already, right? And then you have so many different things you got to consider as time goes on. You got to consider the being stripped away from your safety. What type of this caused the indigenous people? What type of petrification? There's no separation. There's no separation in the indigenous people and the people enslaved Africans. There's no separation. You have biracial per se. You have mixing of DNAs. You have time. You have just time spinning, and you have various mutations in the physical and phenotypical expression of a thing. Phenotypical expression of a thing, because we look at that. We look at Egypt and we look at the phenotypical expression of Egyptians today are not the same phenotypical expression of the Egyptians that were carved in the temples. You know, although African, of one comes many, right? Of one comes many African people. One African and all these nations come out of, you know, the physical expressions is a variety, and we get caught up in the physical expression of a thing because we're handling and we're having our human experience in our physical experience, as opposed to our vibratory and spiritual and intuitive, and just clock back into our internal awakening. So we as a people get to educate ourselves with right knowledge, right? Those are some books to take a look at. There's quite a few. There's the Indigenous Peoples Indigenous Peoples, the history of an. Oh gosh. Let me look it up. Indigenous Peoples History of America, I believe.
The United States.
Of the United States, I believe it is. Yeah, here it is. An Indigenous Peoples History of the United States by Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz. And you can also get you can get Ivan Van Sertima, They Came Before Christopher Columbus. And you can also get Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and and the Rise of European Capitalism by our great ancestor and historian and lecturer and master teacher, John Henry Clark. And I suggest that you become intimately connected to him particularly. There are many, but he's one that you want to become intimately connected with. So I suggest you get into his vibratory energy by watching videos of his speeches, of him speaking. And he has 60 years of work in the world space, 70 years. He has lectures that go back as far as the 60s and 70s. And you will get his energy and begin to intimately connect with the energy to be able to infuse you with African. Because the way you're learning history, as I stated before, it causes you to have ambivalence even out of your own consciousness to begin to contemplate this, because you have been indoctrinated and treaded through a subordinate posture. Because white-centered consciousness is a landscape that we live in, and white-centered consciousness does not coexist with African-centered power and self-efficacy. It does not coexist or cohabitate. According to white-centered consciousness, they're entitled to dominate everybody and everything else. So it's not spoken out that way. It's subtly threaded into the social living condition, which is why Jane Elliott says that if you are a white person, you are likely a racist. And whether or not, if you're not a racist, then it's because you did something different to cause yourself to not be a racist. But the basic fundamental consciousness of the way people who are having a white cultural experience are taught and bred, and the societal cultural experience is superiority and domination and entitlement.
Competition. Yeah.
Entitlement. Competitiveness.
Winner has to be the
winner, loser. And then there's, this is just, even if you put it lightly, just everyday, regular John and Jane Q. Public, smiling, nice white person that you just interact with on a regular basis. There will come a day when they will be condescending, because there is a notation of superiority and superior intelligence. There is an internal notation of particularly Africans, particularly indigenous Africans of this continent, or those who are the descendants of enslaved Africans, intentionally ignorant. There's a footnote. There's a mental threaded dot footnote right there. Children under the age of 5 years old, the black doll, white doll experiment, already see the black doll as the bad doll. Have not been in the planet, have not been on the planet, but that long, and already they understand the world as bad as black. Black is bad. What happens with children who are having a white cultural consciousness? The white doll is the good doll. The white doll is the pure doll. The white doll is the happy doll. What do white folks think of themselves? What do white children believe of themselves? We used to have, back in the 80s, we used to talk about how white parents parent their children. Don't be doing all what you see them white kids doing. You can't do that stuff. I don't care where you go with them. You cannot do what they do. Why is this? Why is it that the way they're rearing their children different, and they tell African people that you're rearing your children wrong? Because you're rearing your children for safety in the matrix. People who have the white cultural consciousness are rearing their children to be in charge of you.
Mm-hmm.
So they allow their children to have self-agency very young, to the point where it gets out of control. Because something like that must be put in a funnel, and it must be controlled, because we see what happens to grown adult white males who will go kill Emmett Till, who have an emotional flare-up and cannot ground themselves at all. I'm hurting, stop hurting. Or I want to do this thing, so I just go do it. This is something for us to think about. This is something for us to contemplate and to really ground ourselves in it, because we are the ones who are not, conditioning ourselves and our children for safety. It's the social landscape that we live in, and minimizing it, because people who have the white culture experience also minimize it. They minimize it for their psychological safety. They don't minimize it because it's actually the right thing to do or is helpful in any way. They minimize it because they don't want to deal with it. They minimize it because they don't feel responsible for it, although they are directly responsible for it. And silence is also admission.
Right.
So that has nothing to do with you as an African person. People who are having a white culture experience, I've already told you, let white folks handle their own business. Let them clean up their own houses. The issue is they have to adjust to you being a fully functional animated African, and they don't have to like it. Period. But the point is for you to get up the courage to actually become a fully functional animated African, because it's some work to do. It's some work to do. So as we stand with our indigenous history, our indigenous historical line, and we stand with our people across our development, we get to have a conversation of our own personal growth, self, and safety as a priority. Because of the social landscape we live in, is not our fault, and I don't feel responsible for it at all because I don't contribute to it. I've been living my life for the majority of my conscious life in support of myself and self-efficacy and mastery, and the sovereignty and human rights of African people and the world's landscape. I've committed myself to that. So I don't participate in madness. I don't participate in insanity. I don't co-sign foolishness. You're not going to get that from me. You're just not going to get it. And I have the line in the sand for boundaries for all of it. And it's for us as a community of people to take up ourselves and know that our humanity matters. Our humanity matters.
Yeah, it definitely does. It's up to us to really uphold that, in particular landscape. And it brings to mind the whole thing with the Dave. We also want to talk about the Dave Chappelle special, The Closer. For anyone who hasn't seen it, first off, we encourage you to see it. Mainly because, at least for me, I encourage anybody to see anything, because it's best to have your own judgment based off your own eyes and your own analysis. So please go see it. And I say that to say, just kind of looking at the landscape we look about, we talk about our life matters, and how do we relate to that, and the different avenues in which that's addressed, right? And what we've grown to find just, over the past 20 something years, when we look at an artist like Dave Chappelle, who, we find essentially be like, he's pretty much a genius in his craft. Like, we think of him now, like, we were talking about, what if George Carlin was still here, as far as someone who talked about real social commentary in a real, like, raw and honest way. Dave Chappelle is definitely one of those comedic minds who does that, right? Who takes the idea, like, we think about comedy, you think of this, the court jester was a comedy for the king, right? And like, the court jester is the one who basically was one of the only people who could make fun of the king, and have it be a romping good time without losing his head. Exactly. But really addressing all the ridiculousness and asinine things that may be taking place in the kingdom. And comedy, comedians essentially do the same thing. The best, we find the best comedy pieces come from how we addressing everyday real life issues, right? And making light of it, making jokes of it. Because if we go back to it, it's going to be probably miserable, probably like a frustration or whatever it is, you know, the typical bills or discrimination or whatever you want to call it. And Dave Chappelle is one of those artists who we've going to find that does it pretty masterfully. You know what I mean? And with this new series, which he stated himself will be the last for a while, he was really able to address varying situations with our social landscape right now, in a really raw and honest way, while still being his Dave Chappelle self. And you know, he recently got under fire by the LGBTQ community for his comments and for his jokes. And with something like that, given his presentation around it, was just like basically addressing how different communities are treated in the social landscape, right? How are Black bodies treated? What's the residual effect when Black bodies are harmed and Black people are harmed, when human rights are attacked? Bless you.
Thank you.
Are attacked in a public facing landscape, right? Or attacked in the public eye. Like, what does that look like? What happens? What changes? What changes for those who are deemed as the attackers, right? You know, like what systems start changing depending on the groups. And you know, a lot of what, you know, he went under fire with, like, we don't not get into the jokes per se, what
we
they
want
were.
you to watch it for yourself.
We want you to watch it for yourself.
Yeah, we want you to hear his unfolding and
right, how he unfolds the story, how he does the storytelling, because that's really what it's about, is the storytelling of it. And pretty much the crucial aspect of it is just like, you know, who is there preferential treatment in the system for who's getting priority, who's getting the hearts and minds of the people when something's going wrong, right? And we see, you know, for instance, you know, we look at somebody like the baby or what have you, and everything that took place this past summer, with the comments that he made that were deemed as directed towards LGBTQ community, and how he almost lost his career, right? He lost every festival after that. I think it was like 7 or 10 festivals after that he was on the lineup for. He got pulled off all those lineups after his comments, which were deemed as an attack on that community. Whereas, you know, he also has there was a point in time where he, you know, ended up essentially killing someone, another Black person. Whatever the altercation was, it did happen, right? And it happened, and there was no peep. There was nothing that took place to change the aspect of his career. I remember when first hearing about him, there was something where he beat up some guy, whether it was staged or not or what have you. He beat up some guy live on camera on his phone. And, you know, things like that go under the radar of importance when you look at someone's character, when you look at accountability, when you look at those particular things. But when you look at what takes place within communities like, you know, the LGBTQ community, or communities that have gotten progression in particular, in their fights for their human rights, right? In their fights for respect and equity and dignity, the plate gets moved closer and closer to them on the table, right? Whereas you see the African community here and abroad still waiting to eat. So how are we dealing with these things and these symbols and these situations? How we're told to deal with them, especially as Africans, right? How are we told to deal with them? Where are we looking at first in an identity? Are we looking at ourselves as African first? Are we looking at ourselves as any part of any particular group first? Is it ourselves as a particular title first? Right, those particular aspects. How are we treating those things, or how are we told to treat them, and how are we responding to that? Right, like what are we putting first in order to ensure African sovereignty, or to ensure African equity, dignity, respect, and justness in this particular society? Right, what are we told to subscribe to, and do we? Right, and what we tend to observe is that we subscribe to a lot of the foolishness, a lot of things that, you know, are geared to the deficit aspects of our community, or rather have become the deficit aspects of our community that were basically shaped by the matrix, shaped by the system over time and conditioning. You want to call it the hoodness or the ghetto fabulousness or the hypersexualization or the violence against one another, or like all those things that were actually perpetuated and conditioned by virtue of proximity and economic reshaping outside of our own control. Those are things over time and conditioning we've subscribed to, right? And we've learned to believe as on top of an idea of learned helplessness is what is attributed to being an African, or a Black person in America, in the United States, and how that view looks like abroad to other people. What does a Black American look like, right? What does it do? How much do we trust a Black American? If we if we immigrate to America, how much do we trust Black people? Let's watch out for them when we get there, or when Black people come to other countries. Are they like just like this anomaly type of situation where like it's this weird thing to see a Black person there, or to be normal? What is it to be normal? What is it to be held to a certain standard of humanity, no matter what space you're in, right? And there's a lot of challenges in navigating that, and it shouldn't have to be, right? It shouldn't have to be challenges in navigating you happening to be a melanated person of African descent moving through space and time with other human beings. Yet you get treated
so much differently,
right? And not in a good sense, right? Because there's those that are treated differently in a way that upholds them, treated differently in a way that keeps their neutrality. The
language and the behavior and all these things.
Culture, the clothing, all those pieces that kind of attribute to how should we respect you, titles,
and the quality of life,
right?
It's regions. Like no one really cares if they impinge on the quality of life of African people because of the social landscape. And people who are having a white cultural experience consistently make an attempt to try to minimize the impact. And African people are not helping that. We as a people, because we, for one, most of us are historically ignorant. We only know pieces and bits and sound bites of our real and true selves. Many of us use religion to relinquish our own personal responsibility to be in inaction, right? It's a crutch. It's application of what we're doing. It's not changing people's behaviors and actions for them to stand in balance and in harmony with their environment. It allows them to do a little bit of something, claim that nobody is perfect, and then take it to the Lord in prayer. Which then means that you're not on track for revolutionary, you're not on track for sovereignty for African people. And I've met entirely too many people who feel like that's acceptable. And it's not acceptable. I don't need to tell you it's not acceptable. There is actually metrics that tells you what a fully functional animated African is, what the duty of a fully functional animated African is. You can do your own analysis, your own checks and balances to discover whether or not you're making the cut. You don't need me to come in here and then make me the enemy because shoot the messenger because I told you it was true. I need more fully functional animated Africans on deck, because with fully functional animated Africans, you have safety. You have people who see you. You have an environment of affirmation that is centered around African-centered consciousness. That's what's available. That's what I don't have. And I'm not here for performative. I'm not here for posturing. I'm not here for any of the foolishness, that we got out here in our spaces these days, that we're substituting as something is better than nothing. It doesn't have to be something that's better than nothing. When you come from the civilizations of people that created what came first, the chicken or the egg? How all of a sudden you're willing to accept? We in the African community, we let's say our parents tell us we don't never go up to them. You can be 2,000 years old. You'll never be as old as your parents. You'll never have as much wisdom as your parents. This is what they believe. And in African-centered cultural consciousness, if things were in balance, that would be true. Today, you got kids who grow up and they're smarter than their parents because we got everything is dysfunctional right now. This is intentional. But the system and the hierarchy of responsibility and duty is out of place in the African community, so everything is just out of whack. But in our cultural context, your children never grow up to you. So what came after me is my son. Yeah, you can do this or do that or do this, but you never grow up above your parents.
Mm-hmm.
They gave you life. They brought you here. They sacrificed and brought you into the world to do what was needed for you to be here as the conduit. The divine gives the breath of life that breathes life into the growing cells that then become you, that passes through the triple darkness and then enters the world from the womb. Right? Seed meets egg. Egg, divine intervenes in that space. And in that moment, when seed meets egg, there is a breath of life that is moved in that space. Energy that enters that seed and egg as it comes together, and boom, the explosion happens. And then that egg just continues to duplicate. That's the process of every human. But white-centered consciousness minimizes that process. It minimizes that process. It has taken over so many spaces and places out of its own petrified psychosis. And we have to dial this horse back. We got to dial this wild, I don't even know what to call it. It's a wild thing that needs to be put in check, because it is running everybody into a madness. It's frequency. It's not of balance. It's not of harmony. It's not of preservation. It's not of ethics. It's not of any of these things. It's strictly about selfishness and scarcity. Petrified fear mongering. That's what it's about. Greed. Fear, and it has everybody functioning in the same space. More and more people are vibrating out of selfishness. Even their kindness looks like selfishness. Mm-hmm. Even their giving looks like selfishness. There's something in it where they're still taking for themselves. Right. What most people really need is therapy, and particularly African people and indigenous people. They need African-centered consciousness. This is why I'm saying to you, become intimately connected with Baba John Henry Clark, and as well Dr. Francis Krause Wrestling, also Dr. Patricia Newton, Nana Dr. Patricia Newton. These are people you want to really come familiar and intimately connected to these particular ancestors, because they will speak a light into your spiritual and energetic being that will help you to transition that space, because there are not many fully functional and animated African psychologists, psychotherapists, and clinical social workers, because you have to really shave that information off. You really have to process that information from a place of self-efficacy outside of the matrix. And the 99.9% of the training that you've gotten came from white male scholars. So how are you going to make African people and the issues that they're having, that white people who have the white cultural experience, minimize as insufficient? And they're using these mechanisms within the psychosis, within behavioral consciousness, within science, within sociology, to create dysfunction in African people, in their minds, in their hearts, in their emotions, in their communities, in their spirituality. These things are actually creating dysfunction. So how can these things be there to help? And if you, as an African who's trained in these areas, who are instructed in this space that you must have this as your pedigree, it must demonstrate your ability to facilitate this title. If you cannot put and breathe life into another African in this particular way, that is not about anything you've been educated in. You don't need no education to breathe life into an African. Just want everybody to know that. Mm-hmm. You don't need to be stamped with anything that came out of the matrix that proves that you've dedicated your allegiance to being indoctrinated by the matrix, to their ways of thinking, because repetition is the mother of all learning. So if you stayed over there learning in their perspectives long enough without having control and being in the driver's seat, which most of us are not, you are likely a double agent. You are acting as an agent of white-centered consciousness for the destruction and oppression of other African people. And your information, advisement, your suggestions cannot be trusted to support fully functional and animated Africans. It is an entire classification in and of itself. But we as African people are not connecting with that. We refuse to acknowledge this. So therefore, if we refuse to acknowledge it, that means we're not making any corrections. That means we're not fixing it. So this is why I say, I don't care what these folks tell you, we're not on track. Because too many Africans are not. And then we have little bits and pieces of information that work, but there's a whole landscape of stuff that has to come together. It's not just religion. You know, I used to be Hebrew Israelite. You know, that entire pocket of information is insufficient when it comes to fully functional and animated Africans. It's entirely insufficient. It's insufficient because you have to go, in order for you to become a fully functional animated African, you have to go back farther than 5,000 years. You have to go back farther than that. You have to go back farther than 50,000 years. Your research has to take you back 100,000 plus years before you can really come back. And you have to go in touch with your Africans and be with your African-centered wellness, where African people were once well, where they once had an ability to think for their own greatest good, and I was my brother's keeper. And there was no need to worry about people stealing, because if you stole, you probably took something from your own cousin.
More than likely.
Because you're in the same village and community. You're not going to steal from your family, right? Like, this wasn't a common thing. Having to have this sense of aggression that African people that are now manipulated and have adjusted to is a result of our experiences inside of tragic and traumatic experiences. These are our expressions of trauma. We have to go back to a place when African people were healthy. When African people didn't need to try to posture up their outside to try to make their inside feel better, which is ass backwards entirely. You should be able to walk the street looking like shit every day. But as long as your head and your spirit you're supposed to be like, I'm so amazing. Woke up, I'm so amazing. Stepped out, I'm so amazing. You should be able to look like shit. You should literally be able to physically look like you're not trying to be seen. Your things.
And still be felt.
See, that's fully functional animated African. And that's something that most people cannot achieve. Because if they're not physically looking like their best, there's no swag on them. They don't have no sauce on their walk.
When people want to wear all these things to try to swag out and just be hollow as hell. Hollow as hell. No social skills, no energy, no spirit about you. You don't even know they're in the room.
If it wasn't for them bright ass glasses or wild ass, shiny ass teeth or big gold necklaces or huge, teeny tight ass clothes with the butt all stuck up in the air, you wouldn't know they were there.
Huge fros that were bought at a store and the
big crazy wild hair, crazy looking eyelashes that you can see 3 blocks away. Like, you'd never know they were there. Obnoxious attitude, just self-centeredness, male swag, bravado, foolishness. You never know they were there.
Language pulled out of a BuzzFeed article, trendy slogans to say in conversation until they burn out from the nothingness that's in their brains. That's what we deal with out here on a regular basis. We deal with it a lot. African is no good. It's no good coming from you because you are the essence. You have the spirit.
What do you need to perpetrate?
What's to perpetrate? Like, and I see things like, this idea of, more and more of us sharing like imposter syndrome and things like that. I'm like, what do you like? You already built into brilliance. That's
there.
Actually in your DNA. Like, did you take the time?
Activate it.
Take the time to activate. Take the time to understand it. You're not taking the time to understand it. You're too busy in the rat race trying to figure out how to keep up with what this matrix has been selling you of yourself. What this matrix has been educating you of to make you think of yourself. Not realizing that it's only a dome. You're living in the dome, in the Truman Show dome, because all that's inside that dome is what you believe to be the world, and there's so much more world outside of it that it's not even funny. A world that actually is yours for the taking, and for you to be in that space of the power, right? In yourself and in your community. All the stuff that you're being taught and that you're subscribing to is for you to maintain this idea that stuff is the elite. Right, when we still talk about the first black this, the first black that, the second black this in 30 years to do this matrixy thing. The first black actress to win in this category 8 times. They trying to find any way to cool the soothe the soul of the savage beast by telling you some new thing. The first black male scholar to win this 8th award in the second year of winter when the frogs come out of hibernation and other bullshit that they make up just so you can feel like you're included. Participation trophy to make you feel like you're included in white society. And white society meaning this matrix because it's centered around white consciousness and everything in between, and all the Eurocentric consciousness in between that has been propped up as the pinnacle. You have to achieve that. And we still believe it. And the thing that, and the conditioning is so sad around it because we literally can get it fed to us as this is what's happening. And we're like, yeah, and we still subscribe to the shit. How are you getting it? Is that bad now that you're getting the education around what's actually happening and you're still subscribing to the lie that's been given to you for so long?
This is unfortunate. How do
you sit in the room of truth and then when you walk out, go back and take nothing with you? You left all that knowledge in the room that you just gained. You go back and literally got your mind wiped again. Is that strong? I refuse to believe.
It is. It is so strong because repetition is the mother of all learning. So I'm the person that I'm coming in to be with African people. You guys, excuse me, with these allergies because they're like, this is crazy. We were at the farm and we were at the they have dogs that are up there, and I love them. They're so beautiful, but they get my allergies
with the allergies.
They get my allergies up. But we challenge African people with quite a few things. As I stated, that there's so many pieces, and I'm not here to diminish the journey of anyone.
Right.
It's necessary. But my thing is, be in motion, right? And as a learning and development minister of learning and development, it's important that we catalog what we know. We catalog what we are moving forward. What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve? Right? Working backwards. If we know where we're going and what we should be trying to achieve, so many of us, I want to get this, I want to get that. It may just get you trapped in this acquisition cycle, and all you do is just pick at the universe and at the social energy and try to get stuff. And that's as far as it goes for us. We're not attempting to create sovereignty. We've moved into this radical individualism conversation. Every man for himself. Every group want what they want and nobody else. So who cares? And we are now starting to associate with other human beings the way that the Matrix associates with human beings.
Mm-hmm.
Just a number.
Yeah.
Just something to move out of my way because it's in my way. Or just something to usurp because I need something it has. I'm just going to take it and go. Because who cares? Who cares about the life this person lives? Who cares about the humanity or the children or the families or the aspirations or the struggles of that person? Because I'm just going to take what I need to keep it moving. See, this is what we're doing. And we are picking up because it all starts at the head. So the higher you go, the wider you get. So what is creating the energy in the space? So I'm very staunch about how I create and how I curate energy around me. Where I go, who enters my space, how you going to move when you enter my space. Because I also realize we have bad manners. We have no social etiquette. We have no African social etiquette. We take up too much space. We cut boundaries because nobody has reared us and told us anything. The Matrix told our parents they couldn't rear us 10 years, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. If you whoop your kids, I believe when your kids should get a whooping. I do. I believe children should get whippings as a means of helping to condition their behavior. Unfortunately, unless you can raise your children in a space where you can curate them and they don't have any social influence, an African child may not get a second chance. So if I have to impart that lesson on that child, it may cause you to get an ass whooping. That's my theory. Some people don't believe in children should get whippings. But because we're not rearing the kids are growing up and they have no social etiquette.
Right. Because it's not just whoopings out just for whooping's sake. But
No,
you got to
it's a
teach
method of
consequence.
it's methods of
You got to
discipline.
teach discipline and understanding.
Self-discipline.
You play with fire, you
Yes.
get burned. In short, and you ain't gonna be pulling
There are
fire out of your ass all the time. So it
There
might
are
just
consequences.
might look like whooping. So
It's not fair.
yeah.
And it's not fair. It's not fair that African people have to live under this type of experience where I don't know if my child will get a second chance to make a mistake. So I have to impart on him as much as I can. You got to be on point. As a child, you have to watch what you do, watch where you go, watch whose company you keep. Because you may be a fully functional animated African, but your friend is not. And your friend is going to get you caught up in some situations, which often happens. I'm an adult, and I've had adult people as late as of 2 days ago try to get me caught up in their foolishness. Grown-ass people. Grown. Way grown. Age is no indicator of intelligence.
Definitely not.
Nor is it an indicator of maturity.
Definitely not again.
Neither. And why is this? This works against African sovereignty. It works against our journey to empower and to create community and unity among ourselves. These things work against that effect. So having African community and the critical mass creates safety and insulates African people. It also allows us to curate the social environment. So many of us have bad behaviors because we are not curating our social environment. Who is curating our social environment? The very same social environment that hates and dislikes and anti-Blackness African people. That's the space that is curating our space. So how do we pull out of that space healthy, fully functional, animated Africans? Unless you are dictating and curating your journey. And it's difficult to maintain it because every turn you make, the matrix almost forces your hand to compromise. And you also have to know how far to go without busting the levels. Because there are some of us that are always on 10,000. Their levels are always so high that there's never any peace in them. And they start to physically express hostility, nastiness, disdain, discord, disgust, anger. Yes, I understand, African, and I heart you. I heart you. I understand your understanding. But what I also know is don't allow these folks to steal anything else from you. They have stolen enough from African, from indigenous people, from people around the globe. They've stolen enough. Catalog your progress in this learning and development experience. Know where we are going. Know what it will take to get there. Know what is in your hand. Know what you are working with. If you're not CEO, don't say CEO. Oh, well, speak as if. No, that's a trick.
Living in delusion.
Do not speak as if. Get there by picking up what the tools you need to get there. And be in progress on your checklist. I need this, and don't cut corners. People run into me all the time, and they have been skipping all the dots in between, and I'm very meticulous when it comes to certain types of details, and they are offended because they've been found out. But I'm not here to bust you. I'm just going to do me. Get out my way or participate. It's up to you. But you know what they do? They siphon off. They try to pull off a little piece, and they don't make any contribution, and then there's no balance. See, that's what happens because we are not curating the African social condition. So when people say, you're talking about separatism, you're talking about pull away. Well, guess what? African people need time to curate their social environment. African people need time to heal from the trauma and the harm that has been caused to African people. Undo them. They've been drugged. They've been fed poison. They've been miseducated. They've been, their social environment has been disrupted. They've been mentally invaded. There's been sources that are mentally and spiritually invading African people's peace of mind and consciousness. African people have an inability to even think balanced. I have conversations and I swear, I'm like, what did you hear me say? Because you're off on a tangent right now. What did you hear me say? And I swear, no matter as much as I am inarticulate and is articulate in our communication, these folks get lost every time. I'm like, dude, you're in the brush right now. Come out of there. Come out of there. What did you hear me say? Because what are you talking about? And this is what the brother Dave Chappelle was saying.
Exactly, yeah.
What did you hear me say? Because I don't know where you're going with this, but you are truly off onto a tangent. And I'm not going to meet you there.
Listening.
They're not listening. Grandma said, don't you get down in the mud with them. If they in the dirt, let them sit there. You stay where it's dry and clean, and they will figure it out, or you leave them there. You know what your Christian Bible says? If they don't receive you, dust your feet off and leave that town. Leave that city. That's what it said. Metaphor. In whatever situation you happen to be in. If you as a fully functional animated African, which you are owed, it is your birthright to be fully functional animated African on your own pursuit to happiness, which means you curating your African experience in the fullness thereof. They can't accept that, then dust your feet and leave that town. Leave that city. Plain and simple. For all of my Christian folks. It's not difficult to hear, to contemplate, but it is difficult to implement. And that's what most of us get to fail. We don't implement. I'm really tired of talking to African people about all that's broken. And I'm giving solutions, but nobody is doing. I'm not the only one giving solutions. There's tons of solutions out here. You'll never hear me rhetoricing people. Every now and again, I'll give you a quote. I'll give you something, but I very rarely rhetoric other people's things because it's not for that purpose. I want to stretch you and have you synthesize because that's what we are lacking. We are lacking in the synthesis and the application. That is us. And I can tell you right now, you actually have to do the work for the work to work. You cannot skip the dots in between. You cannot posture that thing and prep it up and make it look good and walk out there and be like, "Bam, I'm here." Because it lasts that long. And I'm telling you, the performative foolishness has no teeth. It has no teeth. And out here in this revolutionary streets, when you out here trying to be a fully functional animated African, you got to have some strength. You got to have some strong arms. You have to be prepared for anything because we have not yet curated a space where African people can be safe, supported in that Wakanda state of mind 24/7, 365. And so, I'm standing with Dave Chappelle. You ain't got to like it. I really don't give a flying flip. You can work that out. That's between you and your guy. But as I stated before, and we talk about it all the time here on Soundbytes, you're not listening. You're not listening. You're just not listening.
Cherry picking what, like, can't be out here picking what we think fits the narrative that we enjoy. Whether it's to prop up yourself or to make someone else feel bad, or make up an idea that someone else is harming you, even if they're not. That there's a lot of that going on in this generation. There's a lot of like picking, like it's like when you go to Google and you're trying to find a certain type of thing, and you literally go to the first article that comes up, and then that's the article that proves whatever your point is. Meanwhile, it's like 20 pages of actual articles that may be strong research that may be stronger information than that one article you picked up that probably was like redirected via BuzzFeed or whatever. So I say BuzzFeed because that to me is like the ultimate of just like, you just pulled some shit to do out of your ass and called it content. But anyway, I digress.
Yeah, so that's for us to work on, family. That's a conversation for a consistent, dedicated trajectory of incremental journeying and creating our path for success. Incremental, sustained. Okay, these are the words that matter for the African in terms of regaining our, and there are many fail-safes in the matrix. Every key you open one door, it opens another door. There's an automatic trigger. So I'm here to tell you that you're going to have to become extremely agile if you want to ever know yourself. If you are right with being a hollowed out straw man, then such is life. So be it. But please get out of my way. Please get out of my way. I got work to do. I'm honestly, and it's so there are so many. And as an African, I remember that place. This is why I became this is why I have the commitment that I have. This is why I decided to be the difference that is different. This is why. Because if you never heard it, if you never thought it was possible, you met me, it's possible. You just decided that you were not going to make that choice. And I guess that's your right. This is the society we live in. But in African, betrayal, treason, and turning your back and betraying your self-soul and the birthright of your children, it's not something that's even looked over. It's not taken lightly. But since we don't live in African-centered culture consciousness, just get out of my way. I got work to do. I'm busy, right? And we're trying to impact change here, and we are living for the growth and empowerment and the sovereignty and restoration of African people, not against anyone else.
Right.
If everybody gets to stand up right, African people also get to stand up right. You can't say that, oh, we're doing good or we're doing this or we're doing that, if you're not fully functional animated African. So you're not at the table as a what do you call it? Formidable, right? You're not standing there fully dressed. You're standing there and you got to do the hop and bob. That's you. You in the room with everybody else that's strapped to the nines. But African people are actually doing the hop and bob. Hoping, and we got mad accolades, and we got we got billionaire coin, we have builders without names, we got all of this stuff, but you're still standing at the round table like a hop and bob, hoping that they drop something off the table into your hand. That's your position right now. You're not sitting at the table. I swear, I wish I could stand up and do the hop and bob. That'll make it so much more funnier. So that you can see how you showing up in the world, African. You don't need no one's permission. You already came into the planet whole. You got some healing to do because you done took some bruises. You done took a beating. Your generations have taken a beating. But trust me, there's a way back. It will require work. You must work the work for the work to work. You must do the work for the work to work. So, the Matrix is pushing us into our feeling space, and it's a reason for that, so that they can play us. It's easier to play people who are in their feeling space because you're not thinking rationally. As long as you're in your feeling space, you can be manipulated. So I sincerely hope that we move into a place of courageousness and examine this matrix as a means to an end temporarily, because it is a maintenance conversation. But I hope that we're willing to commit to a long-term trajectory so that we do not leave our children's children in the same condition that we were left in. Okay? And just making sure that your kids go to college and become indoctrinated by the matrix, that's not actually putting them in a better situation. Just to let you know. You're not actually putting your children in a better situation. Because even in the university, as we stated earlier, if you don't insulate your kids, they're going to become hollowed out when they get there. And when they leave, you might not recognize them. And then 15 years later, 20 years later, I run into them on the street or at the job or someplace, and they're a hater. Because that's what's happened. That's what's been happening. That's what continues to happen. So it is for us to do the work. It is for us to compassionately check in with each other. It is for us to compassionately set the stage for safety, sovereignty, and protection for African people. We standing with Dave out here in these streets.
Right on.
We standing with Dave. And you ain't got the light. But I speak plenty good English. And I'm from a time when good communication was a thing. Being a good conversationalist was a thing. Not talking to people in memes. I mean, in emojis.
Right.
I still got to catch myself
that's just
right
so
now.
weird to me that grown folks doing that to me. I'm like, all right, then I guess.
I'm like, what did you mean to say? Heart,
Your
love,
heart,
love, hand, hands, heart.
shady dude with shit sunglasses on, sunflower,
What's up with that?
sunburst, high five, or whatever is going on out here. I don't know, but we gotta get back to something where things make sense again.
Well,
So, yeah,
we got stuff to work on, family.
absolutely.
We got stuff to work on, but the work works when you work the work. So please do the work.
Absolutely.
Please take up, do the work. At the end of the day, you in this life. People say, I ain't gonna struggle it out for this life. You don't have to struggle it out. It's not okay for the Matrix to censor people and punish them for having an opposing view that is healthy for their self-efficacy. It's healthy for African people to want to be fully functional and animated Africans. It is healthy for African people to not allow others to mistreat you. That's healthy. And they're impeding your health. They've poisoned African people. They continue to poison African people. They continue to give African people bad food and use them as a bottom rung to usurp and use in the system. They'll never tell you that obesity is a problem because they continue to share. You continue to eat from Nabisco. Who owns Nabisco? Nabisco, Nestle.
Yeah.
They're not going to tell you don't try to rear your children, your social environment. They're going to continue to sell these movies that cost $200-300 million to produce, and box office this and movie that, and you continue to go, and these things are programming your social environment. The propaganda that is in our space right now is the same propaganda that was used to support people killing the indigenous that were on this land, because the soldiers didn't do that alone. Civilians had a hand in killing indigenous people on this soil and were paid by the government to do it. The people agreed, and the military agreed to put 6 million people into Upton to kill them. People agreed to this because of the same kind of propaganda of where we are right now. And if you're not careful, you're in a dangerous space right now. It's dangerous. It's dangerous. So Africans, I hope you're thinking.
Yes, indeed.
I hope we're thinking. I hope we're planning. I hope we're preparing. I hope we are fortifying. Fortified.
Please make sure you do that. Yes, absolutely. Peace and blessings, family. Please make sure you fortify, as Nefra said. We gotta be out here fortifying ourselves, so that's for sure. So again, make sure this is Soundbytes Radio, y'all.
This is what we do out here in these streets.
That's what we do.
It's all good. It was a little bit like low energy today. We had a very long day today. We worked at the farm. We just got it's a little low. But we're high energy, but we're low. I have the allergies, so that's kind of kicking in for me. And he says just like tired. We was at the farm today. So
as remember, so you can subscribe to us on YouTube at Soundbytes International Radio.
Yes.
Remember to do that. Subscribe. Hit the subscribe button. Make sure you tell your village to subscribe as well. Also, remember, again, we're on Facebook. Follow and like us on Facebook at Soundbytes INTL Radio, and on Instagram at Soundbytes Bless You International Radio. You can follow us there, and remember to take a listen to our past broadcast, audio broadcast. Take a listen on Spotify and Apple Podcasts at Soundbytes International Radio. And again, if you do find value, as you see scrolling down the bottom, if you find value in these conversations, please feel free to share any energy exchange. Any size is supportive of our independently run operation here at Soundbytes. You get the Cash App at $Soundbytes Radio to be in support. In the meantime, you know how we do when we close out. We get into that power that I am with the brother Naeem Bricks, myself, and the brother AJ Throwback. So stick with us, and let's get into that I am family. This is Soundbytes National Radio.
Mm-hmm. I walk the face of the earth with a boldness which makes people ask who sent you. I tell them I am. They tell me that's a cute affirmation, but it's not an answer. I reply, listen again. My affirmation is your answer.
It's the power of I am. This is the greatness of I am. Look at the strength that I have. None of the truth can deny that. Hear the proof in the hi-hat. Hit to the reflection, I digress. I love me more, never love less. I love me more, never love less. $1 million dreams, yeah, how I manifest it. Look deep inside, yeah, you be the blessing. $1 million dreams, yeah, how I manifest it. Anything I want, yeah, tell them. This is the power of I am. This is the greatness of I am. Look at the strength that I have. None of the truth can deny the power of I am. Handsome chocolate mofo, yo. Anytime I'm on GoPro, lyrical high home growth. Living spots with a coke so low. Conditions without morale so low. So I pitched it fast, pitch it slow. To the cows call home, bro. It didn't make sense. I was told as a child I wouldn't be shit. Revenge on my mind, started flipping the script. They fed me lines, started puking that shit. They treated me different, I embraced that shit. You know the ones that be closest to you to be the family ties. Sacred bonds, seeing plenty murder, dirty service, ludicrous, cock up with a dirty burner. But better believe in me 1,000%. Better I achieve what I was sitting here to get, and I couldn't resist. Kill these niggas with their toxicness without a popping pistol monotonous. Told myself I couldn't rock with this. Hanging with goofies couldn't get rich. True blood suckers couldn't see bliss, couldn't see shit. Kiss old face, nigga, you dead wrong. I ain't regurgitating, percolating, singing the same song. I'm blessed all day long, you lame all day long. Having a form of godliness, but denying the power thereof. Fuck nigga, I am.
Decline. I'm totally surprised that I ain't lost my mind. Had to take setbacks and learn to with setbacks that those I gave jetpacks that no planes don't fly. Now I'm in no space, so wasting my time. Focus my goals to shift paradigms. My get up and go to keep my folks from dying. So I'm on the road with a goal that's refined. Yeah, riding with a mean vision. Reflecting from every angle through a clean prison. Doesn't matter, reflecting in technicolor and gray. When I lost my mother, found peace aside my queen, and I laid in on my brothers. Yeah, the odds was shaping up the grand scheme. I done wrestled to the mat on my damn demons. In a matter of time, became a champion. Now my everyday mantra to do the damn thing. So my aim's to pack out every arena, inspire the future leaders with every line of the levers. Of gods and unbelievers, do what they can't conceive us. Love what we do and leave us. Brick, they never see us. Woo! God damn, I'm feeling good, motherfuck. What they say, I'm doing what they never would. Yeah. Get a grasp on your life, yeah. Been many sacrificial prices. Podium done playing nice, yeah. They're gonna recognize who the nice is. From the north to the southeast, kicking others every lane, share about seats. I'm aligned with it, man. You cannot be. Say anything I won't yet die.
This is the power of I am. This is the greatness of I am. Look at the strength that I have. None of the truth can deny that. Hear the proof in the hi-hat. Eternal reflection, I digress. I love me more, never love less. I love me more, never love less. Turn up. $1,000,000 dreams, yeah, how I manifest it. Look deep inside, yeah, you be the blessing. $1,000,000 dreams, yeah, how I manifest it. Anything I want, yeah, turn up. This is the power of I am. This is the greatness of I am. Look at the strength that I have. None of the truth can deny the power of
Man, I ain't
I
talking
am.
in terms of I wish, I want to, or even I will anymore. Only things I proclaim, I do, I have, and I am. I do as my ancestors instruct. I have all I need to affect change, and I am a living magnification of God.